I'm going to play a little bit of music here. Welcome. So everybody, give it a couple of seconds while we let some people trickle in. We had some technical difficulties there at the beginning. So let's get started in just a few seconds. Oh yeah. For anybody that read the news today, this one's going to kind of go out. Sorry about any language, anybody.
Oh yeah, Chris. I'm well respected where I'm from, you better come correct. No, I'm not performing at your show for free, you gotta cut a check. I'm connected on the dark web, I need bins, they gon' give me that. I'll probably never find a band in your bank, that's where the pennies at. Woke up and bought illegal guns on the net, now I got plenty straps. I'm only eating steak and lobster, I just watched you buy a kitty pack. I feel untouchable, I send my hacker, he gon' come get rid.
That's about enough of that, shall we? But let's get started today. How are you doing, Soups?
I'm doing wonderful. So good to be on your show, Jordan.
Yeah, so I've been wanting to have you on for a little while here, and we are going to have another more formal episode that's going to come out. But for today, I wanted to have you on here. You guys are my sponsor for this quarter, and you guys have a ton of good content out. You guys are putting out some really, really good stuff. I see you guys are doing a big content push with all of your folks. You always have really good tips and tricks. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about today for my audience, live and in charge here, is your 7 predictions, because you put out an article and you talk about the 7 things that you think you're going to be seeing coming here in the next year. So yeah, if you could tell me a little bit about yourself and about Sardine to get started, that would be great.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so I'm Soups. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Sardine. We started the company about 4 years ago. Prior to starting Sardine, I used to run risk for companies like Coinbase and Revolut. And prior to my foray into the world of payment fraud, I used to, dabble in ad click fraud and cybersecurity threats, etc., at a variety of startups. I also have a PhD in computer networks, distributed systems, and this is almost like 20 years ago. And my thesis was actually on detecting denial of service attacks and botnets, and how do you scale web services even in the face of DDoS or bots. So yeah, in short, I've been in the world of cybersecurity, fraud, etc., for pretty much all my career, the entire 20 plus years. And Sardine, we started 4 years ago. We like to call ourselves as building Lego blocks of fraud and compliance for people who are builders, right? So the primary Lego block that we provide is that of device intelligence and behavior biometrics, right? That is our USP. That is what differentiates us from other providers. The second Lego block that differentiates us is we do fraud and compliance in one platform. So one API, one singular dashboard, which has features like rule editor, a case management, all the way to SAR filing, and one feature store, which has 4,000 plus features, which powers both a rule engine as well as a machine learning engine. And the benefit of having one system which does both fraud and compliance is that there's a lot of efficiencies at scale. You don't have to share information outside a platform because then PII leakage happens.
Yeah.
And also a lot of cost savings there. Right?
Yeah, and I can't wait till when we do our episode. I know you've done a lot of these podcasts and these things before. So on our episode that you and I do, I'd love to really get into the nuts and bolts on how that works. I think that my audience would be really interested in that. I have a pretty technical audience, so getting down into the nitty gritty is usually pretty good. But for the sake of this particular live stream, which we are live right now, and it always makes me nervous as hell when I do these things, I did want to start. Actually, I'm going to start with number 6 on your list here, just because you mentioned it, that you came from, you did your thesis on DDoS attacks and bot detection, and your guys' software does do that. And I think, so this one here, you said that the e-commerce consolidates bot detection with fraud risk. Can you tell me a little bit about what you mean by that on that prediction? And I'll tell you what I'm seeing on my side as a merchant.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great one to actually start off with, because that's something that you and I could probably jam on for the entire episode, right?
All day, yeah.
So so what we're finding is that look, there are a lot of CAPTCHA-based tools out there to fight bots. There's both invisible CAPTCHA and visible puzzle-based CAPTCHAs, where you're either moving a slider or solving some other puzzles, right? Now, the visible side of CAPTCHA has its UX challenges, right? So, a lot of elderly folks typically are not able to solve them. And also, it has a big challenge in the face of Gen AI, right? Nowadays, AI algorithms can easily tell you which of those grids have a street lamp in there, right? So now let's cut to the chase and look at the invisible side. The invisible side of CAPTCHA is all about detecting, bots like scripts, emulators, proxies, and VPNs, right? And that is where Sardine specializes on the invisible side, right? Because we built a device intelligence slash behavior biometrics SDK, which does three things: device fingerprinting, and second is captures behavior biometrics around how you type, swipe, scroll, move the mouse, hold the phone. And third thing it does is bot detection, right? And now what we have observed is that, as we've been offering like fraud prevention tools to merchants out there, we've also been asked by a lot of these merchants that, hey, we also have all of these CAPTCHA-based tools out there that help us stop DDoS attacks or help us prevent bots. So we seem to be double paying, right? Because Sardine has an overlap in that Venn diagram as well. We also do the invisible CAPTCHA side of things, right? So that is where we are coming from. We're realizing that, the same solution, Sardine solution, can actually stop bots as well as help you fight payment fraud, right?
That's super interesting. So for me on my side as a merchant and someone that does work in this space every day, like I have a day job and I do these things every day at a very large e-commerce merchant too. The challenge has always been the crossover from where does fraud start and like bot prevention begin? Like where's the crossover there? Like I can see these things on the fraud side of the business that we want to stop, but if we really start peeling back the layers of this onion, like we could see these things earlier in the process if we really wanted to. And like I will say, like my company's done a really good job of recognizing that, and our teams have worked really, really well together to kind of have those discussions. But it does come down to there's people, that want to do, like captchas are a great example, is they just want to capture every login. Like, why not, capture every login? And they don't realize like how frustrating that could be. Like there's an old YouTube video about a guy on PlayStation trying to solve the CAPTCHA. And he's like the most challenging game in the world. And he's like 10 minutes video of him just trying to solve it. And it's funny. Anybody should watch that. But it goes back, like that's a real frustration. Like I even did it earlier today. I was trying to solve a CAPTCHA, and I was actually on a one-on-one with one of my staff. And I'm trying to solve this CAPTCHA, and it's eggplants, and it's a picture is cut open eggplants, and it's all select all the eggplants and below. And I'm like, dude, I never see eggplants. Like I don't like eggplants, so I don't encounter eggplants in my daily life. So I had to kind of just guess and hope that it was right, and it was right. But it's like it comes back to this, like we need to use these technologies to identify what's bot, what's human, what's hybrid, and act appropriately. Like one of the things, that I think a lot of people do is like a lot of websites you see, I'm going on a big tangent here because I'm passionate about this piece, but is email validations. Yeah. So you sign up, it sends you a thing, you can't do anything until you get it. Now I understand why they do that, but you could use technology to not have to do that every time. You could only authenticate the ones that you identify as needing that as a step up authentication. So you could pick and choose. And I think that that's where we really need to get with these in this modern world of bot detection and fraud, is we need to be, there's different streets. It's not a one size fits all. It's not, you can't swing the pendulum too loose or too tight. You really have to do a case by case. And the only way to do it is with technology. So yeah.
Totally. Yeah.
So now let's jump back up to the top, because I think that this is going to be the number one thing on all of our minds, especially this year. This is everything to us. And I think, like I said the last couple of years, that like abuse and refunds are more than your chargeback losses. And I would say that's probably still the case for a lot of companies. But scams, what's going on in scams? Because I feel that scams are jumping up to the absolute top of the list. And I feel like it's because we are getting good with technology on regular carding and regular like purchase fraud, that now the human being is now again the weakest link. So we're all the way back to the old tried and true social engineering. So what do you think about scams? What, like, it's number one on your list.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, I mean, in the UK, which has had faster payments for far longer than the US, the dollars lost to scams already far eclipse dollars lost to credit card fraud, right? And as other countries, including the US, we march towards faster payments, the same thing is going to happen to us as well, right? The unfortunate thing, though, is that we don't have a concept of assigning liability at all in most of the faster payment methods out there. The UK again is leading the charge over there, and the most recent announcement that their regulator, the payment services regulator, made is that starting October 2024, both the sending and the receiving bank, they will share the cost of scam losses 50-50, right?
And that's October, you said, right? Because I've been hearing this has been coming for like a long time, but I haven't seen, like, you're the first one that I've seen the date. And I like to see that date because I know, like, I had Julie Conroy on from Datos Insights a while back when like faster payments was really first launched, right before FedNow's launch. And there was still that discussion of like what was going to happen with the 50-50. And I think we're going to talk about that on another one of your points, but like, I'm happy to hear that there's finally a date. And I hope that it doesn't do what it always happens in our industry and get delayed, because we really need some sort of something on these faster payments. I love faster payments. Like, I pay some of my bills with faster payments, and it's amazing. It's a lot nicer when I'm on the way 3 to 5 days for it to come out of my account. So yeah, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. No, the date is actually, so the UK has had like a system of calls for comments, et cetera, and then they of course it's very controversial even now, because I think I'm jumping ahead. Like, one of the other points I made there was that social media companies, they actually originate a lot of these scams, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they all start on an Instagram post or like a Reddit post or some meta post, right? And similarly, telcos, right? They all either start with a text or a phone call, right? And now the financial industry has been saying that, hey, you gotta bring the social media and telcos to the table as well. They have to also partake in this liability shift. However, if now you put yourself in the shoes of telcos or social media companies, they are not in the financial flow and the money flow. So for them, the incentives are next to zero. It's really a reputation, right? But my point being there that you can't really solve for this problem unless you bring all participants in this together, right?
Yeah, because like, I mean, even me, like I look, I mean, I'm big on my social media. I'm on the TikTok. I refuse to do that one. But like, if you look at like the comments that go down on like a regular, like a popular Facebook post, for example, like you'll see so many people, somebody will post something, usually it's ridiculousness, about like Trump or something, but then they'll post something and then you'll see a comment underneath it and it'll say like, hey, I like your profile. How are you doing? And you see people start to engage in these conversations. And you know exactly where it's going to go. Like, it's going to go to, let's text, oh my gosh, you're so cute, let's run away, but oh, I need you to pay my cell phone so I can talk to you. And then all of a sudden it's spiraling into these, and you're sending your life savings. Same thing that we see happening on Reddit and all that. And it comes back to like content moderation, but like, where do you draw the line? Who's policing it? How can you police it? And to even take it to another level, like, it used to be super easy to spot these things. Yeah. It used to be like broken English trying to communicate with like Midwest people, so you could pick it out really easy. But now with Chat GPT and Fraud GPT, you just put in what you want. It pumps out a natural sounding situation. You copy paste. You can have a whole conversation that they're just copying it on their side, getting a response, pasting it back. And the conversation is so natural that people are falling for it more than ever. This is what I'm saying. Like, humans are the weakest link. And now with like things like faster payments where they can get this money and go, you're right. Like, there does need to be more than just, we can't just always put it on the banks. And that's why I think, like you had put even on your notes here, like Regulation E doesn't allow the consumer to be refunded if they authorize a transaction. And that's great. And I think like, then that's been around for a long time, but like, people should, when they willingly participate in the transaction, they should be held accountable for their willing participation. However, we need to kind of have some sort of like bubble wrap to an extent, if you know
Yeah.
what I mean. Does that make sense
Yep.
on there?
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I think like a lot of the services, you know, even like I use Zelle pretty extensively. I pay my pool guy, I pay my gardener with it. And it asks me like 15 questions every time. Are you sure? Are you really, really, really sure? Are you really, really, really sure that this needs to go to them? So I mean, they're trying, but at the same time, like you can't always save a consumer from themselves at the end of the day.
Correct. Yeah. No, that's true. And the other thing that will happen is that, first of all, like if you're paying using Zelle, like somebody in person, you know them, so that's a trustworthy relationship, right? I think in the with the two trends of Gen AI making like identity theft easier, and secondly, as more and more commerce just moves online, scams are just going to proliferate, right? Right,
Yeah.
because it's easy to be anyone now online. So making a faster payment online is where scams are happening, and that is where we see the problem. The problem is that actually, if you break it down, right, like the the whole world of fraud prevention was always concerned about the user that you have, like the user of the bank, is that a fraudster? But in the case of scams, it's the user on the other side, the recipient,
Yeah.
the fraudster, right? So, and no one today has built like a good comprehensive database of trusted counterparties. We've done KYC of the sender. When you send money or wire out of your bank, et cetera, they're not used to verifying the counterparty ever. Yeah, they do sanctions checks, but that's about it, right? So that is a
Yeah.
fundamental shift that needs to happen, right?
And, you know, it's funny. I'm having flashbacks. So this is like years and years and years ago. But like I worked at a company that had marketplace situations. And there was payouts that happened, and you're right. We would KYC the the upfront transaction, but not where the flow out was going
Mhm.
for the longest time. And I remember when we finally did the audit on that, we were just like, oh, where some of the stuff was going. We're like, oh man, like we got to call a hyperwallet for some of this. But it's true because and especially in faster payments, and I think we can kind of probably move into the faster payments fraud prevention piece now on this, which is number 2 on your list, is with faster payments, just to level set, like you can't do credit card to credit card faster payments. It's direct deposit to direct deposit bank. So there's 2 banks on either end that's going through some sort of RTP rails, which is like most people know Zelle, and then FedNow, which came out in July of last year, which is hopefully taking some more adoption. I know the IRS uses it because they're going to pay them, but they are very quick at taking the money out. But at the end of the day, you don't have a lot of insight. I could see how like bank A doesn't have a lot of insight where the money is going to bank B unless it's the same bank. So if I'm sending money from Chase to a Bank of America, for example, like they're kind of trusting that Bank of America is doing their diligence on receiving the funds, right? Like they should be. I mean, hopefully that's what this 50-50 is going to do, which comes to the thing is like you said it on another show. You said like the faster payments being faster fraud. Julie said that on when she did my faster payments as well. But like, do you see a world where on either end of this transaction, this faster payments actually gets slowed down by
Oh
the
yeah.
bank?
Mhm.
Yeah. So can you elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, I totally think that'll have to happen, right? You have to add some friction, some guardrails. And to be honest, in most of the cases, uh, people are not really expecting the money right away, right? So even if you added like 6 seconds of delay, that's enough to do
Yeah.
some of the checks that you want to do, right? Like check if the email of the recipient is legit. Is it a popular, reputable domain? Check, there's lots of email databases out there, like, when was the email first created approximately, right? Check if the recipient's, name and address matches the account number and the routing number. There's variety of non-consent based bank consortium databases out there that you can query, right? And then also check when the sender, when they're sending the money, are they under duress? Are they being influenced, or coached by someone? Are they on a phone call with someone who's helping them,
Yeah.
right?
As a device intelligence stuff coming in, like that's what
Exactly, exactly.
some of the stuff that's always been like, I've always blown away by some of the stuff that like you
Yeah.
guys can see on not you guys specifically, but like device ID in general, because I don't want to give away any guys secrets that you guys have, but like just how much data you have, like that's available to you to make those decisions. So many people just think, is it an iPhone? What version is it running on? Where is it sitting? Nah, there's so much more. Like
so much more. Yeah.
accelerometer data, all that, So I think that, yeah, like that's a good point, is like, what would, do you know, so FedNow is like, I think the one that most of the people in our industry know, just because it made such hype, even though like Zelle exists forever. And we always know Zelle is the one that was the problematic for scams usually. But like they use RTP. And with is RTP or FedNow, like those rails themselves, talking about putting in any tools, or are they leaving it up to their users and just facilitating the actual like movement themselves?
Yeah. The unfortunate part is that, most of these rails, they actually think of themselves as message passing primarily, right?
Okay.
And they don't want to get into the sort of taking the liability
That makes sense.
business, right? That's kind of unfortunate, because I think that's going to hurt adoption of all these protocols, FedNow, RTP, etc. And that is where we think that we could play a role. Like, we, in the long run, see ourselves as, okay, like in the world of network of networks, all these networks talking to each other, somebody has to step in, do all these verifications of both the counterparty and the sender, and maybe even take on the risk of actually, sending the funds and making the sending bank whole in case it was actually duped, right? So, but yeah, like, I haven't yet seen RTP or FedNow, like, at least to the best of my knowledge, say upfront that, this is what the bank should do, et cetera, to stop any of the
best
fraud.
practices.
Yeah.
Call these people, call Sardine, and they're going to say, every bank, call Sardine. So let's kind of move on. Like, we had talked a little bit, we just mentioned KYC, KYCing the sender of the money. Let's talk about your prediction on KYC. Number 3 is KYC becomes retail's new norm. Could you elaborate on that for me?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's actually been kind of shocking to me to see that, how fast fraud has, proliferated, and different types of fraud has started to happen, especially in the light of COVID, right? After COVID, it became very normal to to order groceries online and then go pick up in the store, or you order your TV online and go pick up at the store. So there's a lot of this, what I would call buy now, pick up later fraud, right? We've heard stories that,
Opus.
So fraudsters are recruiting mules, right, to go and pick up on their behalf, right? And what our thesis over here is that, retailers are slowly going to wisen up to this, and they're going to realize that, hey, we've always talked about omnichannel. The retailers have always talked about omnichannel, right? They've said we want to have online sales, we want to have point of sales, right? But they've never had the systems in the back end to actually tie the two things together. But as omnichannel really becomes a reality, and then they will be able to tie your online identity together with the person who's actually picking up the goods, right? Maybe you can say that, hey, you bought a smart TV. Maybe you are getting flagged for using a card which is considered to be high risk. Then maybe Best Buy could actually ask me to do an ID check, right? Or a selfie. And then when I go to pick it up, just match it, right? Am I really the one picking it up, right?
You could do, like, I mean, just thinking here, like, because I just recorded another episode about passkeys with Auth Signal that hasn't come out yet. And it, like, we talked about a new authentication process that they're doing for phone, for IVRs, where they can actually send a link, and then you have to do a biometric authentication there, and it authenticates you as the user for, it's basically the passkeys bound to that phone number in this call center. And that biometric authentication then gives you the green light. And I wonder if there could be something there where, like, a passkey could be bound to, like, one of these BOPIS, buy in store pick, or buy online pickup in store transactions, where when you get to the counter, in order to release it, you have to do a passkey biometric authentication right then and there. Otherwise, you're not getting the goods. I think the only way that you would get, like, some sort of adoption on that is if there's a liability shift, like if it passes and the item was picked up, but then there was a claim later. And I think that like those like all of our, it seems like the theme of all this is like, who's going to pay for it? Like, where's the liability going? Even on like the faster payments we were just talking about, it's like the who's going to pay for everything is what all this comes down to, you know? So like, if you did something like that, who's going to pay for it? Or if like the store did all the best KYC, who's going to pay for it? You know, like it seems like that's where it is. But like you know, we had talked about on some of the notes here, like the friction in when people like want something, and for high dollar stuff especially, you know, like you can throw a little more friction, you can, at people, because they'll tend to want to do it. And I did this when I worked in ticketing, you know, for limited events. Like you could pretty much put anything in front of anybody ever, and they want to go to that show so bad, like they'll power through all of it no matter what walls are there. What do you think about any of that? There's a lot that I just said there.
Yeah, no, so that's true, right? Like, so your point being that incentives matter in some sense, right? Like, so if you, and the other point that your comment actually just made me realize is that that's like speed and persuading people to do something quickly is what scammers rely on quite often, right? Right, like there's always a hustle, like when you're being scammed, right? Like, hey, you know,
What's the angle? Yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah, I do have a question from the audience here, because I did mention passkeys, from Andrew Austin. Like basically, what is a passkey? So passkey, guys, is a authentication style. I don't know how to frame it right, but it's an authentication style that's not username and password. It is a basically device bound, and the only way to unlock it is by authenticating biometrically that device exactly to that session. So think of it as tokenization when we use credit cards, where like your checkout process is using a token. Like you store a token on you as a merchant, and you're now sending that token for a payment, but only the bank can decrypt that token to know that it's really tied to you and your merchant account, and know how to route those funds. Passkey is essentially the same thing as that, but for a user to log in. So Google just took all of their accounts a couple of months ago and said, we're moving everybody to passkeys, no more username and password. And you have to, like, you could do it on like Macs and stuff. You can use your Touch ID, you can use Face ID on your phone, but basically you're not going to be entering a password anymore. You're going to be using this passkey thing, which is it's a big long token that is your session. It's bound to that device, it's bound to that finger, that face, and that authenticates you as a user. And I think longer term, that's where we're going to start to see these more trusted identity things come in through a KYC situation, where people will be looking for that particular, this is a passkey and it's been biometric authenticated. We know it's this person. There's a check mark there, and off they go. And that's all I'm going to say about that for now on this particular episode, unless Soups, if you want to jump in on passkeys and if you have any thoughts on that. But because I do have an episode coming out that is sponsored by you guys that I would like everybody to listen to. So any thoughts before on that at all?
yeah, no, so passkeys is is what I would say is that it's solving for like strong device binding in some sense, right? So it's saying that, you know, like these are your trusted devices, and if I can do a sort of a push into that device, push notification or what have you, and you unlock that device with the same Touch ID or Face ID that you always used to unlock with, then now the online website also knows that you are who you say you are, right? Yeah, I really like that.
Yeah, they're good. They're good things, everybody. Like if you everybody talk to your company and adopt passkeys, get rid of passwords. I'm tired of using them. Yeah. Speaking of new technologies and new things, so digital growing pains for traditional businesses is number 4 on your list. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So so one thing that we've been finding is that we started our roots with solving for fraud in digital first industries, right? Like crypto, fintech, money loading, or gift card purchasing. And now we are increasingly seeing that there's this high dollar value physical goods industry as well, which actually sees very much similar types of attack patterns, right? Because you could be buying a car online, or you could be, you know, you do an account takeover and you move you send a different truck to pick up goods at a warehouse, right? So these are like high dollar value items, car $20,000 or more, a truckload of Apple laptops, 100,000 or $1 million or more, right? So the cost of of a failed KYC or the cost of an account takeover that you did not detect is actually very high, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
So in that case, right, what we are seeing is that as a lot of these sort of legacy industries, which are usually pen and paper based, right, or in-person based, right, as these industries, they move increasingly online, they are essentially facing the same challenges as any high risk industries have, and that is where we feel like we could be of help because of our roots in digital first industries, right? And in short, like we like to say that if you grew up in a tough neighborhood, you learn a trick or two, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I would say, like, especially with your guys' background in crypto and money movement, that's definitely a tough neighborhood to live in. So yeah. I will say, like, I've seen it, I've experienced it where the deprecation of phone was a big thing where trying to get customers to move from phone-based sales to online-based sales, and then leaving those legacy channels up. But I will tell you that, like, fraudsters will learn real quick where your weakest link is. And if you're using like a phone channel, which doesn't go through your traditional fraud tools, like something like you guys, there's a gaping hole there where the person on the other end, the customer service agent, has their own goals, how quick they're trying to get through the call, the sale they're trying to make to get these people through. Like, people will find the weakest link. They will find the path of least resistance, and leaving up things like phone channels on these traditional spaces very much does do that sort of thing. And the pen and paper thing is a great example. Like, businesses that do trucking or book trucks or rent cars, like not even like the Hertzes of the world, but like the commercial vehicle rentals, like renting boom trucks, those sorts of things. These are industries that like are now having to shift to online, and they don't have that experience. And like this equipment is expensive.
Yep.
Like, you're right. Like, if it's gone, it's $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 at a time. It isn't buying a $300 coat that's gone. I'm sorry. Sneakers are fine. These are vehicles that are now gone, and like now they're in a foreign country in a container ship somewhere. So very, very, very much. Yeah.
Yeah. Actually, can I share a very interesting story?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this happened to me. So I was getting some work done on my house, and the contractor told me, hey, in order to buy this, lumber, I have to actually show up at the lumber yard and give my card, in person and do it. And I was very surprised. I took some time off, drove like 20 miles to the lumber yard, and I asked those guys, hey, why did you make me drive all the way? Why couldn't I have just given you the card on the phone? And they said that they are actually seeing an increasing amount of fraud, and they had seen that somebody had ordered over the phone like $100,000 worth of lumber and showed up in a truck and drove off with $100,000 worth of goods. And of course, they were on the hook, right? Because
that's all the people that are probably listening to this right now are like thinking, like, they're so concerned about their like shipping their stuff out of their stores. They don't think about, like, people are doing this. People are just turning up at a lumber yard and driving off with enough lumber to build a house, using like fake credentials or stolen credentials. I mean, we would see the same thing like in like ticketing and stuff. You see people buy luxury packages because like those are the ones where like, you got to call in, you got to talk to it. They got salespeople that want to do it, and you get in and you get out before they even knew you were there. I'm going to buy a luxury box tonight for the game. I got 20 of my friends, give me the best package, all the food. Yeah, don't worry about it. Here's my card. Out of there, see him tomorrow. And like, it's just so crazy that like how there's these opportunities with that you don't even really realize or think that exists. Somebody's gonna find it, So anything else on number 4 before we move on?
No, I think we covered it. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's party on this one. This is the one where I think you and I are going to have a little bit of a different opinion. So you said that number 5 on your list was a shift away from guest checkouts. In my company, we just launched a new guest checkout. So tell me all about your opinions on this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So couple of opinions here, right? So what I would say is that when you're doing guest checkout, of course, it's faster, right? Because people can be in and out very quickly. But then from a retailer's point of view, you're also losing out on getting the consumer to actually have a stored value account with you so that they could come and do another purchase in future, right? Uh, so that's one demerit of relying on guest checkout too much. The other demerit is that we are also seeing like the retailers we are talking to, we're seeing a lot of refund scams or return scams.
Mhm.
And when you have these return scams or the refund scams, what's happening is that, people are, they bought something on a guest checkout. You never even collected their email or their phone number or what have you.
Mhm.
Now that person is returning a piece of item or clothing or what have you. And you're actually not trying to collect all of that info at that point of time. So maybe you're not aware of what might have happened is that the person who bought the goods actually now hired a mule who's actually now returning it on behalf of the fraudster, right? So therefore, the best way of triangulating this and really understanding this is what's happening in return scam or refund scam is to actually collect as much info as you can upfront.
Yeah,
Yeah. So that's where I'm
that's
coming
funny.
from. Where
Yeah. So it's funny because like if I look at how I approach guest checkouts typically, is you're going to have less information, you're going to have less about it, so you have to rely more on your device. I do typically tend to put a little more restrictions around like velocity limits and those and amounts and those sorts of things on guest checkouts. But I will say like we are seeing in the world more people trying to abuse GDPR delete requests and CCPA delete requests to try and they use stolen credentials, and then they try and immediately after they make a purchase throw a delete request in to try and basically essentially disappear. And that's kind of an angle that we're seeing. But like there are carve outs, everybody, for in GDPR and CCPA for preventing that sort of behavior. So don't just take every single delete request with a grain of salt. There is certain things that you can do at certain timelines that you can do based on certain behaviors on the account. So make sure you work with your privacy teams to understand those properly and build that, because that's something that I think is more of a little bit of a hole than people realize. But guest checkout, I think, it's trying to get as much information with as few fields as possible tends to be really what it is. And like with our customers, like the nature of the place that we do business in, we don't even get emails all the time. We don't even get phone numbers all the time, because different cultures have different ways that they do things. And it's stumped some companies that we've attempted to work with before, and being able to make those decisions with that. I mean, you can also leverage a little 3D Secure if you really want to, everybody, and then kind of get a little extra layer on those ones. But don't be scared, like if you have to use guest checkout, to be a little harder on those particular people and say, hey, we might need you to make an account on this one. It's no harm, no foul on that. Yeah. Anything else you want to say on that one before we go to the final number 7?
Yeah, on the guest checkout one, what I would say is that I think there's a middle ground here, right? You could always have like a rule-based system which says that, hey, for small items, allow guest checkout. High value items, actually they have to create an account. Risky purchase, they have to create an account. You could also have rules saying that, hey, first checkout can be guest, but then the next one you ping them harder for creating an account, right?
Yeah. I will say, like, long time ago, when I first worked in ticketing, we had a really robust guest checkout system that worked really, really, really well for us. And it was really cool because on the back end, we would tie, I think most people do, but we would tie all their transactions to their account. So even if they use guest checkout, and they had registered an account, but this time they're trying to get through quick, it would still all tie together. So we could kind of use some sort of fuzzy logic to see if it was the same person or not. So that was super helpful.
Yep, that's brilliant. That's the way to do it. Use data and do it passively.
Yeah. Yep. And that's what, like, everybody, you don't have to use the data in this exact session right now. Like you can use historical data from the session and piece these things together to make a holistic picture. Like you don't have to every session doesn't have to be its own unique siloed island. Like you need to look at the whole picture, step back. And I'm sure that's what you guys use your ML for. And you can help people with that. If they're like, how do I do that? You call Sardine.
Yeah, totally.
So banking as a service faces the music. Number 7, the final one, because we already did 6 first, everybody. So number 7, banking as a service faces the music. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So so far, what we've seen is that, the regular common way of doing banking as a service, where, BaaS platforms, they were acting as a middle man between like the sponsor bank, which is sponsoring fintechs, and the fintechs, right? it was actually never quite clear who truly owns the customer's KYC responsibilities, right? And so we would often have our fintech clients who would sometimes come in and say, "Hey, we still want to do KYC." The smart ones, the smart fintechs would come and say, "We
Smart
still want to,
fintechs, yeah.
yeah, we still want to do KYC, even though the sponsor bank is doing a KYC, the BAS is doing a KYC, even we will do a KYC because I think they're being too strict, or or some of the other ones will come and say, I think they're being too lax, right?" So now, of course, the regulators have also taken a look at this, right? That it was never really clear who's truly owning the customer, who's truly owning the KYC responsibilities. And I think what we are increasingly seeing is that instead of the BaaS middleware platforms actually, acting as a proxy to the bank, what's happening is now there's a different type of a BaaS model where they're acting as more of a marketplace, where they're saying, "Hey, we have banks on the one side, like 10 banks on the one side, and we have fintechs on the other." And they're saying that we can actually connect a fintech to many of these banks. And it's a marketplace. You work directly with the bank instead of relying on the BaaS middleware, right? That's one approach we are seeing. So some of the BaaS middleware platforms we partner with, like Treasury Prime, that's the approach they have taken.
Okay.
The other change we are seeing is that a lot of banks, they're realizing that they need to actually do the fraud and compliance checks themselves for the fintechs, right? And that is where they are calling us. So we work with 3 banks today, a few more coming down the pipe. Stearns is one of them, a bank in the Midwest. And they have brought on board like 5 to 7 fintechs and another 10 in the pipeline. And they have built a model where they are doing the ACH origination, the wires themselves, and they are partnering with Sardine for all the fraud KYC checks.
That's an excellent thing. In the House of Fraud, the little community that I launched with Brian and Alexander a couple of weeks ago, one of the questions that we have inside there is like, what do people want to know more about this year and how to solve? And the ACH fraud actually is a really big one. So I will make sure that they call you guys for that, and you can kind of run you through. I think the fintech thing is a really great example because for so long, like they've done the basics and they've kept like what they got to do to monitor the purchases and all that. But they've kind of left it up to the merchants a lot to do their own fraud prevention, and kind of, you got to own it at the end of the day. And I have noticed that we've been seeing more and more banks lurking around the halls of these conferences that we all attend. And that's been comforting to know. And I'm happy to know, like, hear that like you guys are working with a lot of them to kind of bring their technology up to the now, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that is pretty much it for our live stream for the 7 things there. I'm sure people are going to have a lot of questions because we kind of just rushed through it because we did have 10 minutes of a technical delay there. You guys, www.sardine.ai is how to find them. If you want any parting words for everybody here.
Yeah, no, just wanted to thank you, Jordan, for having me on the show. And, big fan of all the work you're doing and all the community building that you're doing. And just the parting words here being that fighting fraud or, handling compliance issues can be very lonely. So if you find yourself in need of friends to talk to, come find Jordan or even come find us. We also organize some events, monthly events, San Francisco, New York City, etc., where we just get like-minded people together to discuss fraud and compliance issues. Yeah.
Let me know if you want to do one in Orange County. I'm happy to host that, MC that one for you guys there.
Let's do it, man. Totally. Don't worry.
I'm absolutely into that. And everybody, okay, you heard it here. I'll be sending out invites to a fraud squad meetup down here in Orange County somewhere. But I do want to say, everybody, like, thank you, Soups, for coming on the show. I really appreciate. I know your time's hard to get. I really appreciate you coming on here. Everybody, the fraud squad. Like, one of the things that's unique about Sardine is if you need help, like, they're not scared to jump in and help you out if you have their product. I think that everybody should at least give them a call, kick the tires on it, do some sort of POC if you could, because I think if the industry chatter that I've been hearing is that it's really, really good, everybody. So that's a testament to what you guys have built. You guys have always been a pleasure to work with through this sponsorship. And thank you guys again for sponsoring us for this quarter. It's been an easy, smooth partnership. I really like this. I thank you guys for putting this together and getting you to come on my little live stream here and everything. Thank you for bearing with me through the technical difficulties. Again, everybody, www.sardine.ai. Thanks again, man.
Thanks, Jordan. Amazing, man.
Oh yeah, Chris. I'm well respected where I'm from, you better come correct. No, I'm not performing at your show for free, you gotta cut a check. Well connected on the dark web, I need bins, they gon' give me that. I'll probably never find a band in your bank, that's where the pennies at. Woke up and bought illegal guns on the net, now I got plenty straps. I'm only eating steak and lobster, I just watched you buy a kitty pack. I feel untouchable, I send my hacker, he gon' come get rid of that. I'm not gon' stop punching cards up till they stack to where my ceiling at. You work a job, wake up and go get behind that register. I'm lying on my taxes, had to use a photo editor. I'm not tripping on my ex no more, I'm way too far ahead of her. My new bitch from Calabasas, I already found a better. You gon' get rich and then go cash out on a Hellcat, that's too basic. I pull up in some shit you never seen before and win the race. I can't dance, but I can moonwalk in these brand new human race. The bullet hit his head and barely missed, and now he got a taper.